Greetings, fellow seekers. Welcome to Zen Confidential. The topic of today's video is Zen, Buddhism, and faith. So I did a sit recently online, a meditation sit with my patrons, and I asked for questions at the end of it. Hey, anybody got any questions about meditation? People had some questions about breath, some questions about posture, and then right at the very end when I was wrapping things up, my friend Mimi shot this doozy at me, and she's like, can you speak to the relationship between Zen, Buddhism, and faith? And then she gave me an out and said, this is a big topic at the end of this sit we've done together. Maybe you can address it in a video, so that's what I'm going to try and do here. It is said that you need three things to do Zen practice: great faith, great doubt, and great determination. There was a Japanese Zen master named Kon Yamada, and he said that this trio of principles is like a tripod. And if you have great faith, great doubt, great determination, if you have all three legs to stand on, your practice will be on firm ground. So if it takes great faith, great determination, and great doubt to do Zen practice, what is meant by this word faith? What are we having faith in? Well, essentially we're having faith in the three jewels in Buddhism, which are the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So when we say we have faith in the Buddha, it's definitely not a faith in some kind of deified being. We're having faith in our Buddhahood, or our enlightened or awakened nature. Mostly when I have heard Zen, within the context of Zen, when I've heard faith spoken of, it's within this context of great doubt, great faith, great determination. So all three are needed for a Zen practice. Are you satisfied with that? I'm not, actually. One of the ways that we made our money to keep the monastery going was by renting out the facilities in the off-season to different Buddhist groups. So in the fall and the spring, we would open our doors to like Tibetan groups, mindful groups, alcoholics awareness groups, some female groups, some shamanic groups. I believe there was a tantric workshop once. And upon the grounds of my sacred Zen center, there was much rooting and breeding and fornicating. One of the monks wound up involved in these practices and impregnated a student and had to move back to Germany to be a father. In any event, at one of these workshops, I was cooking. Right? So we had to cook for them. We had to take care of the grounds. It was kind of cool. You got to support other people's practices and see how they did things. So there was a Tibetan teacher. He was like the guy, it was an American guy from somewhere out east. He's a very famous American teacher, and he had spent a lot of time in Tibet. He spoke Tibetan and I think Sanskrit, and he had translated for a very famous Tibetan yogi. He came into the kitchen one day, and I was kind of good friends with this guy, and he was doing a teacher training course. It was very intense, and he had a lot of his students, and he was holding the space for a lot of really intelligent students. He was teaching them how to become Buddhist teachers, and the whole retreat has sort of a high stakes feel to it. He comes into the kitchen, he swings open the door, and he's very like preppy, like he had sort of silver-haired fellow with a part down the side and off to here, and he would wear these preppy shirts and he'd button them up, and he just looked like a very competent CEO or management consultant, right? One morning, He swings open the door and he comes in and he goes, "What the fuck is Buddha nature?" And we're all like, we sort of stop and we're all sweaty and greasy and bald and the fluorescent lights are coming down on us. It's early in the morning and we're like, I don't know, man, why do you ask? He's like, comes in and he puts his hands on the table that was in. He goes, "Seriously though, what the fuck is Buddha nature?" Apparently he was having a sort of spiritual midlife crisis, and he'd come to realize he'd been using terms like Buddha nature, as I just used, and awakened nature, and having faith in your awakened nature and faith in your Buddhahood. He'd been using terms like this and idioms like this and expressions like this for years and years, and he'd been teaching them to his students. And finally, he'd had like the reverse of a Satori or a Kensho. It was like a taking away of insight. It was like a closing of an opening, and he didn't know what he was talking about anymore. He had no idea. He had this word Buddhahood, but it had no essential meaning to him. So no Zen student, much less teacher, is ever going to have a crisis of faith or meaning like that guy did, because in Zen, we really don't put that much stock in words or even teachings, right? I mean, I was kind of embarrassed. Like the first half of this video, when I'm sitting there talking about, Buddha nature and awakened nature, I mean, I felt my face blushing because I don't know what these words really mean. I mean, they're just words. It's a word like rose, I know what a rose is. I know what it means, but I don't have faith in a rose. I need to experience the rose. I need to see the rose. The rose is just a tool. It's a descriptor. It's a placeholder. Words like awakened nature or Buddhahood, they're also placeholders, or they're words that describe what's essentially, fundamentally, an ineffable experience. So can we have an experience of faith in the Zen tradition? I'm just going to speak for myself here, and I want to kind of tell a story. And it's a very, very difficult story. So trigger warning, if you're the type of person that needs a trigger warning. This is a really difficult, it's not my experience, it's someone else's experience, and it's a very difficult experience to relay, and it's violent and it's horrible, and I'm going to softball it and gentlify it as much as I can, but I'll need to say certain things in order to get this woman's experience across, and then I'll try and share with you some feelings and experiences that I had around this story that relate to this question of faith. Are you with me? Stay with me. Okay. I was at the monastery once, and I was in the office, and I was slacking, of course. I was the head monk, and I was not doing my job that afternoon. I was on the internet, as we all are when we slack. And I'd come upon a Yahoo News story, and it was written by a guy who had won a Pulitzer Prize for journalism, and it was like supposed to be an important interview. And even though it was a Yahoo News story, I thought, well, this seems interesting. I'll read it. So there was a woman, and she was living in an African country. It might have been Congo. I think Congo is two countries. It was maybe one of the Congos. And she told this story. There was a revolution of some kind. There was an uprising, and there was one team and there was another team, right? So she and her husband were captured. And what happened next was the husband the woman was raped in front of her husband, okay? And then the husband was killed, but he was killed slowly. And how he was killed was parts of his body were removed. And then those parts of the body were given to the woman, and she was forced to eat them. Okay? I'm sorry to have to relay that story. I was shocked that afternoon. It was like a summer afternoon like it is now, and I'm sitting in the monastery office. I'm slacking from work. I'm like going from stories about the Kardashians and whatever movies had won Oscars that season to this story about this man and this woman who had experienced a level of suffering that is absolutely unimaginable. It stuck with me today. That was probably 20 years ago that I read this story. I have never forgotten it. It so clearly represents to me all my fears about life, about the human condition, about this cosmos that we live in. My fears that it's a horrible universe, that it's a horrible world, that this realm of reality that I live in, this human dimension, is fundamentally irredeemable. It's really hard to sit down on a cushion and meditate and have faith in Buddha nature. When I think about a story like that, when I think that people can do that to each other. So for me, personally, faith means being able to embrace even that. Okay, that horrible experience of rape and cannibalism and live dismemberment, even that. I do not obviously mean condoning it in any way, shape, or form, or not doing, I don't know, whatever, political actions to mitigate those kinds of events. But it just means that being able to embrace everything with a kind of energy and openness. You know, Nietzsche called it yay saying yes to life. And while I don't agree with much of Nietzsche, he seemed to be in many ways sort of fundamentally nihilistic despite himself, but having the capacity or the ability or the intention, the guts, maybe the heart, to embrace it all, the whole thing. That, for me, is, I think, the experience of faith. And sometimes I have it, man, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I feel tired, I feel worn out, I feel old, I feel sad, I feel overwhelmed. But I know that just saying I have faith in God, that it's all going to work out, or that I have faith in Buddha and Buddha nature, isn't enough. Words aren't enough. Concepts aren't enough. Teachings aren't enough. None of those things are enough to embrace the totality of that story that I just told you. And that's kind of the marker for me. Like if I find myself falling into platitudes, which is too often, unfortunately. When I find myself falling into platitudes or an attachment to certain teachings, I say, hey, is this approach enough to embrace the totality of that rape cannibalism story? Because if it's not, you need to go a little bit deeper and be a little bit more open and a little bit more honest. So for me, when I think about faith and the experience of faith, and I'm really honest with myself about it, the word faith begins to transform into the word trust. And when I experience trust, it's a trust in the cosmos. It's a trust in the universe. It's a trust in that the universe knows what it's doing, right? That it's not totally mad. Because if you're looking at things just from a perspective of human ethics or morals, that story that I told you is there's nothing that can contain it. It's just the universe and the cosmos seem totally insane and totally evil when an event like that can occur of such human-caused suffering, right? But I try, and I often do, but not always, have a trust in the cosmos. And when things get bad, when I'm at sick beds, or when I'm late at night, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm feeling old and lost and scared. Those feelings sometimes can be mitigated by a trust that it's all going to work out, that it's all good on some level. Not on the level of, I have faith that God is going to defeat the devil or that good is going to defeat evil, but faith that my understanding of what's good and what's bad is not complete and perhaps is never going to be complete. But my lack of understanding and my human life and all of our human lives are contained and held within a greater cosmic context within which all these things, quote, make sense. That's faith for me as someone who's practiced Zen Buddhism. I trust this universe. That's what faith means for me. Whew, it was an intense video today. I hope you got something out of it. I hope that maybe, I don't know, man, that drinking my green tea. Listen, if you like this video and you trust that this channel has something to offer, you can hit the subscribe and hit the like. Also leave a comment and maybe let me know what faith means for you. How do you embrace the difficult suffering that you come across in your life? I'm curious to see what your thoughts are on that. I have got a nice little community over on Patreon. There are essays and blog posts, and we do sits, meditation sits, about once a month. So if you want to join me over there, join that community and be a part of these sits, there is a link to my Patreon page in the video description below. There's also a PayPal link if you just want to donate to this channel to help keep it going. But you know, I offer these things for free. I enjoy doing them. I get a lot out of them. So you don't have to throw any money my way if you don't want to. Sending you love, peace, happiness, and a nice, warm, wet kiss. On this afternoon. Ciao.